Welcome! Before we wrap up this course, let us take a look at some useful, slightly advanced Python functionality that takes into account a lot of the concepts that we have previously learned. To save us time, we have written this program that goes over many of the different aspects and concepts that we have learned about Python in this course. At the very top, we can see there's a hashtag exclamation mark, followed by a path. Now, this is called a shebang, right here, as in the comments. So what the shebang does is it's telling us that the program below can be run as an executable using this path as its interpreter, right? So that's where my Python 3 actually lies, in user local bin, which we can check by writing user local bin inside of our terminal. And we can see our Python is located right here, Python 3. Okay, and we can clear this, go back to our code. So the only difference that this does for us is that, as mentioned, it's an executable, right? So without this top line, we can still run the program normally. To run this program as an executable, first we have to actually change the special permissions. So this would be change mode on Unix-based systems, so Mac and Ubuntu. And we can do chmod plus X, and then the file name, right? So since we are already in the right directory, we can just input the file name. And the file is fun times, so we click OK. What this does is it changes the mode of the file to be run as an executable as well. Otherwise, you can't run it using our special nomenclature. And the special nomenclature is actually just doing something like dot slash and then file name, just like that. And this is equivalent of saying Python, so let me write it out, Python, and then fun times, exact same thing. Okay. So let us go back inside of our code. Now let us take a look at what our program actually does. So we can see we're importing our argparse library module, and then we're creating a class called ft. Of course, we have our init function, as all good classes should have. And in here, we have a dictionary that actually belongs to our class instance, right? And this dictionary is actually very interesting because you can see it correlates numbers to different functions, which is pretty unusual, right? But it's one of the fun things you can do with Python. So here we see, for instance, 0 is paired up with our function right here, or method more particularly, since it is inside of a class. Here we also have other methods, and we have a run sequence method over here. And what it does is it simply iterates from 0 to 2, right? 0, 1, 2. And it calls our dictionary. And you can see our parentheses over here, which indicate we're calling a function based on the name of our dictionary. Okay, so it's actually pretty interesting. So when we do run the program, so we can run it from our terminal in here, make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so when we run the program, we can see we can use our special method, fun times, .py, and of course we do need an argument as seen down here, which is my value, and it's basically converted to an integer and passed on to our function, which is then used here as value and assigned to my self.value, which is an attribute that belongs to the instance of the class. Okay, so let's use something like 148 and run it. And we can see it runs test 1, 2, 3 and gives us our results. In other words, we're iterating through the values of the dictionary for which we are then using to actually call the name of the function. So we linked different functions or methods to the values that correspond to the iterations of the dictionary. All right, so that was pretty fascinating, actually. Taking all the different things that we learned and applying it into such a Byzantine method. One more thing, here we have this statement, this conditional statement that says if __ name is equal to _ before and after for the main, right? So this is basically saying is we're only going to run this section of code, which is really what's calling our class, creating our object, right? We're creating an instance right here called ft using our constructor of the class. And then we're calling run sequence right here at the very end. In other words, this protects us from running this block of code when somebody wants to import this program to use the function or something along those lines. So This essentially tells us to only run this block of code when we are directly calling this program. To directly call the program, we can open up our terminal and simply call Python followed by the program name, right? This is an example of directly calling it. And if we use our alternative method, which our shebang allows us to do, then this is also directly calling the program. Let us take a look at what happens if we remove this parentheses after calling our dictionary functions. Okay, so if we remove this, obviously we get an error because it seems to have no effect, right? And of course, this is true since we are not actually calling anything, right? Because to treat this as a function call, we have to include the two parentheses that tell the Python interpreter that we are calling a function, right? So when we do not include this and try running the program with /funtimes, and then we'll use whatever we want, we can see nothing happens, right? Because we're not actually calling the function itself. It's just a weird statement here that makes no sense. We're not even printing it out, right? If you wanted to print this out and see what it gives us, now it does have an effect since we can see something, and we'll see the output simply shows us the objects, right? And you know this is an object bound to this particular class ft, and more specifically to this function of this class, right? And you can see this hex value right here, which pretty much is a dead giveaway that you're looking at an object. Okay, so let us restore our code back to original, and it's good to go. What you have just witnessed here is a slightly advanced Python example with its functionality taken directly from professional software industry. Notice how it is dynamic, reusable, and follows all of the coding principles that we have previously learned. This includes proper nomenclature with the lowercase underscores for function or method names, uppercase or camel case nomenclature for class names, having proper constructors when creating our class blueprints, and of course having a minimum number of lines to actually run our code, making it super simple to use and read.